the worst part about AI is AI bros.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you. You're not doing anyone any good here. Subscribe to my Patreon for all of my prompts. You can have my prompts.
the bro is thinking like writing a prompt is a skill. I mean, it's not really that difficult. Now, in terms of what I think the impact is going to have on artists, like it's essentially like websites like Fiverr and that stuff. Like stuff on the lower end is going to be in big trouble because you're going to get actually better quality things at a lower price. And I think for folks entering the design industry, there's going to be like probably a higher bar to entry, and it's going to be more of a focus on the higher end. If you're just coming out of school, or you're just starting in the industry, I will still say 100% the best places, if possible, to be is within a studio. But what's most important at that phase is that you're working with people that are better than you and that can teach you. And I remember like Nick Campbell from Grayscale Gorilla, he said something that like, if you're the best person in the room, you probably need to go to a different room or go to a different place. And that really stuck with me.
Welcome back to the XR Motion podcast. Today we are very thrilled to have an incredible 3D designer and creative director at Block, Sekani Solomon. Sekani Solomon is an award-winning creative director based in New York City, known for his work in motion design and 3D animation. Hailing from the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Sekani started his career at Imaginary Forces after attending the Savannah College of Art and Design. He spent a few years there before entering the world of freelance, where he worked with various studios such as Buck, Method, Psyop, MPC, and Apple. He eventually found a home at Block, where he started the 3D motion design discipline at the Cash App business unit. He now serves as one of the heads of their new studio team, Creative Studio. Without further ado, Sekani Solomon. You're leading a team at Block. It sounds like you've had some people along the way that have been impactful in your career. As you go through your day to day as a lead, in a leadership position, what things are you doing or focusing on when it comes to mentorship for the people that are working with you?
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street because I'm learning from folks and I'm also helping them learn in certain aspects. But I think to kind of work in our environments, particularly like it's difficult for someone to be like a junior or even mid-level because like the teams are smaller and the expectations are higher. It's like the quality of work that is expected should rival a studio, but you just don't have as many people to do it. So to be in that type of environment, like we typically look for folks that are a little bit more senior, but you're not also just learning design. You're just kind of learning a lot of different things in the business sense, from government affairs and compliance things to engineering things. And that's the thing too. Like when you're in that context of a larger company, you're part of a larger machine with a bunch of different disciplines that have no idea what you do. So there's a lot of educating about like the design process and how you get from point A to point B. But in terms of mentorship, and at least in my career, I feel like for every stage, I've always had a mentor. Even when I was in Tobago, I would look for. I mean, I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, Twin Island Republic in the Caribbean, but Tobago has a population of 50,000 people. And even then, I was like looking for people who did similar things so I could kind of tap them to kind of figure out like what's the best way to go about doing that. But it's also important too to kind of find people online that you want to emulate your career after, I think, are doing really cool things. And like during that period of time, I was making like Hidden on Star Wars. Like Raoul Marx was a huge inspiration to me because he had just dropped those, I think 2015 semi-permanent titles.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what year that was.
I think it's a 2015. I feel like I've seen it. If it's not, I'm going to really question myself right now. I'm actually looking it up. Yeah, it is 2015. Okay, I still got it.
Nice.
This is the one with the astronauts flying
Yep.
through. Well, number one, it was one of the first times I saw Octane. And two, I was like, what studio did this? And then it was just like Raoul Marx at the end. I was like, wait, what? One person made this entire thing? That was
Yeah, dude,
really,
they are so sick though. It is such a great title sequence.
yeah. And after seeing that, I was like, wow, well, one person could execute on something like this, then maybe I can too. So again, like just finding examples like that of, people that inspire you and can show you like what's possible if you put in the effort was really important in my career development. But also I had just different mentors from like design or like business or like just advice on how I market myself as a creative or motion designer or creative director, or like how do I navigate the tech industry. It's just really important to kind of find people that's done it or knows more than you do so you can learn from them.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And also, I know that like we've now talked a lot about sort of all the different careers you've had in many ways and all the different hats you've worn. And I know you talked a little bit about this at Dash Bash just in your talk, but I think it's an interesting perspective to sort of talk through from your standpoint. You know, maybe some of the pros and cons or the things that you've found, maybe things you didn't expect to find when you switched maybe from like freelance to going to staff, or just in terms of work life balance, pay, the workload, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love this topic because I feel like I've experienced like pretty much all of it, right? Like I was full time at a studio, Imaginary Forces. Then I went freelance and worked at a bunch of different studios, and then I went into tech. So I'll start with, I think, if you're just coming out of school, or you're just starting in the industry, I will still say 100% one of the best places, if possible, to be is within a studio. Like, don't worry too much about the pay. Just make sure you're getting paid fairly. But what's most important at that phase is that you're working with people that are better than you and that can teach you. And I remember like Nick Campbell from Grayscale Gorilla. This is like when he was everywhere. I think he said something that like if you're the best person in the room, you probably need to go to a different room or go to a different place, and that really stuck with me. So Imaginary Forces like work with some amazingly talented people, and Imaginary Forces were one of those studios where like everyone wears a lot of hats and everyone got to be part of every part of production, from like conceptualization to design to animation. And so you learn a lot about production and conceptualizing and all that stuff. And that's experience that's really difficult to get as a freelancer because you're typically not always being brought in from the beginning concept phase of production, which again pays dividends later on. So the advantages of being full time is that you learn a lot, but also, freelancers have a final end date, and when that's done, and you need someone to pick up the project, well, okay, you're on staff, you go do that, and then sometimes you could get like the grunt work that other people don't have to do. But you're also like tremendous value because let's say if you could do the same work as a freelancer that's getting like twice your rate, three times your rate, then that's how the company is seeing it. So I was beginning to see that, and I'm like, yo, I'm working weekends, I'm busting my balls here. Like, how can I leverage myself and my time to generate more value? And that's where freelance came in because, you can determine what your day rate is. And so I was fortunate enough to work with like a bunch of dope studios from Buck to uh, Psyop to Method to just a bunch of different studios around New York City. And I was kind of beginning to think like, okay, what's the trajectory here? Am I just going to continue freelancing? And then I got the opportunity to freelance at Apple. And then I was hearing what the day rates sounded like. And I was like, that's crazy. I didn't know people could get, like I'll be transparent. I think the peak of my freelance career at studios, I was making like 800 a day. And then I was kind of closer to like 12 to 1400 when I worked at
Yeah.
Apple. Granted that, I mean, to me, that was a big jump. You're getting taxed so much, though, it's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
is
then
also true.
I mean, I would say like 1100 a day is considered specialist. So
Yeah.
1400 breaking into that is like, wow, that's incredible.
well, this is the other thing you have to consider. Like, typically, if they're paying those fees, then that means like you're being flown out to be in the Bay Area. So you're paying two rents. Like for me, the 200 was just to kind of like it was, I think, 12, and then it moved it to 1400, something like that. But the idea was to help cover your expenses. So I was paying like two rents. I mean, it was just
Mm. Oh, right, because you're out there and you're playing. Yeah.
The highest market.
Yeah,
The highest
exactly.
markets on both coasts.
Correct. Super. I mean, it's just like, and then the taxes were crazy. So, I mean, it sounds like a lot, but then when you get the
Yeah.
project, like, where to go? But anyways, but the idea there is that it showcased like a different bucket of pay, and I was like, okay, wow. So there's this whole um of a area where you can apply your skill set to leverage yourself more. And this brings to mind, I think I mentioned this at Dash Bash, this concept of where to play, right? Like depending on where you decide to apply your skill set will kind of determine like how much value you could get in return. And just depends on again like the market and the company. So say for example, like how I now see it is like the studio, which I think is on the lower end. Then you have the agency where you could typically get a little bit higher rates on at the agency, and then you could go to tech, which typically has the higher budgets. Like if you see what's really funding studios, like in the 2000s and 2010s, it was film and television, and all the big studios are doing. I mean, they're still doing that work, but a lot of the big budgets are coming from tech companies.
Yeah, and also let's not forget that like all right, that's actually insane. Not even, I mean, 10 years ago, Apple is a product and software company, right? That doesn't have their hand in streaming, and like now Apple has Apple TV. Like they're, that's crazy. That's a crazy concept to think that like maybe some of that market share, and obviously not all of it, but maybe some of that market share gets gobbled up when Apple's like, well, we already have all the resources because we're an established tech company. If we get into streaming, we're well equipped to staff a team or, whatever the case may be. But that's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point. I mean, who honestly would be having a bigger budget, right? Nvidia and Google, or like MTV, right? I mean, it's yeah, the tech companies are the big giants right now. So it's definitely, I'm sure, where the money's primarily flowing from.
Yeah, like I'm, even just thinking about a lot of work, and again, like they're not the only place that money is flowing from. But I know during, I think it was 2022, when a lot of tech companies were doing layoffs and companies were being more reserved with their budgets. I think some of these studios really felt it, and you heard freelancers talking about it was more difficult to find work and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely some relation between.
Everyone became a freelance worker.
Yeah, indeed.
Today's episode and sponsor is brought to you by Looking Glass. They create some of the coolest hologram displays I've ever seen. If you don't believe me, check this out.
Holograms from all the big companies have been stuck in headsets. That's cool some of the time, but what about the rest of the time? This is Looking Glass Go, a new type of holographic display that works without headsets, combining the power of generative AI with holograms. Here's how it works. This is what your memories look like today. But this is what your memories will look like from now on, in the future. Our software turns regular photos into spatial photos. We do this by using an AI algorithm to imagine dozens of perspectives of that same memory. The Looking Glass Go then projects out millions of rays of light to bring that photo to life in the real world as a hologram. If you've got a newer phone with multiple cameras, you can use advanced techniques to push the limits and do even more. The Looking Glass Go can also run holographic apps, including one that's very special, because it can make ChatGPT holographic.
こんにちは、はじめまして。私はホログラムです。
By combining the realism of holograms with ChatGPT, now you can create seemingly impossible things, like a holographic friend that you can practice a new language with. For anyone who wants to go even deeper and make their own holographic apps, we've got you covered with plugins like Unity, Unreal, Blender, and WebXR. I'm Michelle, and I've been a part of the team at Looking Glass since the beginning. We've been building this stuff for a long time, because we believe holograms should live in our world, whether we have headsets on or not. Say hello to Looking Glass Go. 1,000 holograms on your desk, in your pocket, or anywhere you want to go.
And for anyone who's curious and would like to know even more information on these amazing displays, go to their website. And if you decide to buy one, we have a promo code down below. It'll get you a nice little discount there. So anyway, back to the episode.
I think if you talk about pros and cons, like with freelance, I think you have diversity in work, and you can begin to figure out like what types of companies are more aligned to you and like what types of studios you like to work with. And you do have the flexibility of time, and you have the flexibility of, charging a certain amount. But then like career growth could be like a little bit more uncertain. And it depends on how you define career growth. Like, does it mean leading a team or working on bigger projects with more impact or more scale? For someone, it could be like really good work-life balance. So I think that's still a very personal thing. But I think in tech also, I mean, I only worked with 2 tech companies, which were very, very different, which were Apple and Block. And again, 2 very different examples. I mean, I'll say what I can say about my experience at Apple. I think they really have their stuff together, and they're very, 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 very buttoned up. And my experience at Block, I think I have the ability to like create more from a visual perspective. I think they allow for a lot more visual freedom, and I think that just kind of gelled more with where I was at in my career. But also too, now they're looking at you as the expert versus like when you're in let's say a studio, you're working amongst a bunch of other creatives. Like when I joined, like no one else kind of does motion design, so you're kind of holding down the fort for that whole discipline, and you're now having to kind of build out processes and workflows to help build that that skill set. And again, that's kind of different because it's not like this for a lot of companies, but when you're starting at like Cash App at that time was like a budding kind of startup within a larger company, and you're kind of building from scratch. You're wearing a lot of hats, and for some folks that may not be what they want to do. Like think about the creative, and then also the metrics behind it and how it performed and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I think if you're going into an internal company, you kind of have to broaden your knowledge, not just on like the work itself, but on other business things, because ultimately work that you're doing is serving the larger business.
Yeah. I remember just an anecdote that really resonates with for me is when I was at that tech company, I remember we had this huge, it was basically like just a massive product reveal. And I think the team that I was working with, we all decided the best use of our time for pre-production. It was crazy that we did it and that we were allowed to do it, but it really did pay off. But we pretty much went to the head of every part of the company and sat down with them for like an hour interview, and we were like, describe in your words like what the product is, because like everyone was selling. I mean, there was a common story, but obviously, like to really get down to understanding how it impacts, say like what just what different parts of the product impact different aspects of other people's lives and stuff. It was kind of an interesting process because it's very similar to like, if you do if you work on a title sequence for a movie, like you want to know what the movie's about, you want to know what characters are in the movie, you want to know what you can't really make informed decisions on something like a title sequence without that extra information. So it's interesting because it's maybe not what you're expecting getting into this industry, but like when you start working on projects like that, you realize it is to kind of what Sekani's been saying. It's so much of the creative storytelling, and how do you, what resources do you need to tell a story, and how do you gather them? So it's interesting to hear that kind of parallel through all 3 mediums you've worked through, whether it's freelance, studio, or in tech.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like companies are coming to us to solve some creative problem, which is either to create an experience or a feeling around a product that they're building, or help how the story of that product is told, or how it's depicted. And The product could be a main title, a TV show, or a commercial, a tangible product of one. It could be a bunch of different things, but ultimately, like, that's the difference between art and design, where like art could be subjective and design has to be like a little bit more definitive because it's about communication. And again, like, you want to be very intentional about like what you're communicating about that specific thing, and not be subjective about the problem you're creatively solving for.
You plugged a book earlier, so I will also plug a book. I thought I had it laying around here somewhere. It's usually close by, but Design is Storytelling is another very good book that just breaks down, it's everything. You don't realize it at first, but you start digging into it, whether it's like how your chair is designed, how the entertainment that you consume is designed, in terms of marketing, and at the core fundamentals of all of it is, design thinking and all that good stuff.
So speaking of, at first it was making something photorealistic. Then you mentioned that we're kind of seeing a trend of storytelling and this POV of kind of being the new angle. Granted, it's hypothetical, but where do you see maybe a future or the next evolvement of trends going?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out myself. Like, this is the thing though, we've seen so many different things in terms of like design, and it's very difficult to do something that feels new. Also, the tools have become so much more accessible, so you have more people making stuff, and then you're scrolling on social media and you're just ingesting so many things. So like the library of visuals for most folks have grown tremendously, and then how do you create something that they haven't seen before? And that's I kind of don't know where the trend is heading, at least from an aesthetic point of view. But what I'm beginning to do is I think if you can create work that solicits a feeling or emotion, that's how you kind of stop people. And that could be from like the compositions or the tension or anticipation that you build when you're creating something, or like a surreal hyperrealism where it looks like something familiar but it's not. You kind of readjusted it and given it a different point of view that someone hasn't seen before. And if you could do those things, which I think it's most difficult, like doing something like that where like you take something familiar and you turn it into something different, and to do that in a way that again hasn't been seen is definitely tricky. But I don't know, the trends. I mean, 2 years ago was NFTs, right? And like, who knew where that was going?
Yeah.
And now you don't hear anything about NFTs, and now it's all it rages about.
So I'm gonna plug it. Because like this is too good of a segue, and I was gonna ask this anyway. With the advent of things like Sora, what impact do you see not on creators and how we're creating, but on audiences and how they're consuming, and like maybe some of the challenges that are gonna arise there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, well, there's going to be implications for artists, yes, but in terms of the viewer, it could go two ways. I think still there's something that feels there's something about AI that still feels very sterile and not warm, or just kind of cold. Like automatically, if I see like a AI generated stylistic thing, I just tune it out because I subconsciously know there's no human effort behind it. And I don't know, maybe this is something innate to me, but it doesn't do anything for me. And I'll be curious to know if audiences begin to feel the same thing. I've heard audiences say like, oh, if like an artist, for instance, creates an album with AI, it's like, oh, that feels cheap. That doesn't feel premium, which I think, is it's good. I do think like this is why social media is great, because humans crave content from other humans. And I think once you kind of figure out like, okay, this is not real, it kind of breaks the facade a bit, and it's doesn't hold its value like it should. And I think that's going to be the thing that keeps people and humans at the helm of still creating things, because ultimately I think that's what we crave from the content that we see, and we want to interact with.
I 100% agree, and it is interesting. I don't know who I was talking with, a very similar conversation where it's like it's kind of an interesting evolution that a lot of people already have an eye for when they're seeing AI generated art, right? And even as it's gotten really good, there's still this like, I guess you could say it's similar to like the uncanny valley effect, where it's
Yeah.
just, you can look at it and say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's AI, but it's just crazy because I mean, so many of the evolutions of AI thus far, like if you look at where DALL-E and Midjourney are just with static image generation, and now with things like Sora, it is so photoreal that really, what is it that we're seeing that we're like, oh, that's AI, because I don't think it can be purely chalked up to like an aesthetic thing. I think I don't know if it's that we pick up on organic movement with such nuance that when you see a character animation, you're kind of like, oh, it just doesn't look right, or or what. But
And the other thing about AI too, it's just, I don't think it will get to a point where it's bespoke enough to ever eliminate the human element from production. Like I was looking at Oppenheimer last night, and I was looking at the compositions and just the intention behind anything. And I think no matter how good the technology gets at generating these things, like, how can you replicate like the specific emotion that someone is having in that moment that needs to be filmed, in my opinion. Again, like the technology could get that good, but even so, it needs to be like, if it's about a specific character, I still think that needs to be filmed. It's like stock footage does not kill the movies, right? And essentially, I kind of see Sora as more of like a image generator in that sense. But I think another analogy to that could be like watches, right? Like we could buy an automatic watch, like a Swatch watch or a G-Shock, but then people still shell out thousands of dollars for Rolexes and luxury watches. And those are handcrafted watches that aren't as accurate, but there's something about the premium handcrafted quality to it that still keeps it valuable.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like
Proof's in the pudding.
mechanical watches, considering that they are in some ways less accurate, right? Like battery dies, they fall behind, they fall off time shortly over time. So like by all standards of what a watch is, a digital watch should be considered more valuable, but people still, that's crazy. It's a good thing.
I've always felt too recently, it was a pair of sneakers and some famous player signed them, and these guys, he was trying to pawn off the shoes with the signature on it. And the funny thing is that they were trying to validate whether or not the signature was right. And the funny thing is like, okay, it looks like the signature, but the importance of it actually coming from the right person made such an astronomical difference. And it's just interesting that it holds that much value, like what people do, and I think that sometimes we don't take for credit ourselves with, and the importance of us being the one that makes it. And I mean, it's just been like that throughout history, including you'll see a dot on a canvas and it's just a dot on a canvas, right? Or you'll see, and that'll sell for millions or hundreds of thousands. You'll see, a painting. Okay, well, you can take a picture of the painting, but you don't want the picture of the painting, right? Like you want the actual piece that the human created. It's an interesting thing that it's just, I feel, built into our DNA, right? It's super fascinating how
art is creation is the human story, really. Like we built civilizations because we figured out how to build things, and then we just kept building things. Some, eventually it became like painting and all that. But I
wanted to say too, I liked how you said that the emotion is kind of where you start off with projects. I think that's just something too that will shine through a lot of the AI content that gets created, is the half thoughts, the just random mashing together of ideas versus the actual emotional value that you start with, you
The
know.
the subscribe to my Patreon for all of my prompts. You can have my prompts.
AI,
I'll
bro.
sell you 600 prompts for $50 a month.
I
I don't
think
know.
the worst part about AI is AI bros. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're not doing anyone any good here.
or the bro is thinking like writing a prompt is a skill. I mean, it's like, I don't know, agree
Thank
with
you.
writing. It's not really that difficult. Now,
Mhm.
in terms of what I think the impact is going to have on artists, like I've always thought about motion design as like a higher end design solution because a lot of companies can't really afford it at the high end. That's why typically studios and agencies work with the bigger companies. And so for like that nail salon or like that tax person in the neighborhood, they would kind of go to AI. It's essentially like websites like Fiverr and that stuff. I think it's going to be like stuff on the lower end is going to be in big trouble because you're going to get actually better quality things at a lower price. And I think for folks entering the design industry, there's going to be like probably a higher bar to entry, and there's going to be more of a focus on the higher end. I mean, of course, there's going to be your different tiers, but like even now, again, like what was impactful and impressive in 2011 doesn't have the
Yeah.
same effect in 2024. Like if you did a photoreal Apple in 2011, you're like, oh my gosh, this person's like a render god. And now it's just like,
Now, like the starting tutorial is like photorealistic food.
yeah, exactly.
So I also do want to kind of like take a bigger step back to, obviously AI is one piece of it, but I also think that you're kind of, and I think you might have talked a little bit about this at Dash, but I'm also just curious about, you're at a tech studio that is working on, in some ways, this future technology, things like the blockchain, and digital wallets, digital currencies, all that kind of thing. I'm curious, just from that standpoint. You've mentioned the NFTs thing, but even beyond the scope of that, do you see use for artists in tools like in technologies that are driving things like decentralization of finance right now, or the blockchain? Obviously we saw it with NFTs, but just curious what your take is on maybe other applications for that.
Yeah, like like if we talk about utility with art and blockchain, I don't know, honestly. Like I think NFT was one proof point, but you're essentially like, it's like you're buying the deed for the art and not the art itself. But I mean, maybe it's like cynical in retrospect, but I do think a lot of the hype around NFT were like a lot of people became wealthy during the Bitcoin ramp up and figured out ways to continue to boost their income by, pumping up artists and making those sales. Do I think there are genuine folks and genuine collectors that care about art and are buying digital art? Absolutely. I not sure if they're in the majority or the minority, but who is to say? I think in terms of blockchain chain technologies, I think there's a lot of great benefits to be had. Like say for example, remittances and transferring funds to different countries. Avoiding like having to exchange into a local currency. I could spend it here and spend it there, but even that has its challenges because it requires adoption from both sides. It's like, well, if I have Bitcoin, how can I spend it if local vendors haven't adopted it? And I wouldn't claim to be an expert on any of this stuff. It's just all like my personal opinions. But for art specifically, I don't know quite yet.
Yeah,
And
it's like we tried the NFT thing, and
yeah, like it really didn't have.
as
I think
lasting an impact.
a lot of collectors were like, "Oh yeah, utility," because like this alien head grows another head after 2 weeks, and it's like it's not really utility. I mean, it does something, but
Yeah, I definitely see utility as being more of you get discounts on something in the future, or even Beeple right now, he's doing a huge his I think it's like a 3D artist battle off at his studio, and anybody who owns one of his NFTs gets a free early RSVP and gets to go in for free, right? Like, I think artists and companies and people can develop ecosystems based on who own their assets. And so I think there's interesting applications for that. But just as you said, well, if nobody has any means of acquiring it or sharing it, then what honestly good is it, right? I mean, I feel like we've talked on this podcast so many times, and I'm not even sure how to develop an ecosystem where, say, for instance, we had an XR Motion NFT and how
Yeah.
somebody could have that NFT and get a coupon or a discount on something. Like, it's just the technology isn't even there yet.
And for the most part, like NFTs were really just mirroring the actual art world because, like, on the higher end, a lot of art is used as a store of value because of the way it's taxed for the most part. And I think, yeah, NFTs just began to mirror some of that in a very, very extreme way. And this is why, like, being an artist solely on the merit of your art is always difficult, because success as an artist in that sense isn't solely based on the art that you create, but it's the feeling and the experience and the hype and the interest you can generate around the art. So it's almost as much about the artist and the way they portray it and the story they tell as it is around like the actual art they're creating. I mean, it's just such a difficult field to make it in.
Yeah. And the NFT craze it just really did not help, I think, set any realistic expectations for a lot of people. I also think it, like, contextually, in terms of what was going on in the world, and it felt like just for a lot of people, the idea of it wasn't even just like, I want to make $1 million. It's like people were getting laid off of jobs because of COVID. And so there's this like, what do I do? Oh, I should make NFTs. And I think it was just kind of from the beginning, it was set up to sort of, I think, end the way it did, which is like, it's still around, but I mean, it's just crazy to think how that like 6 months when people were just like, my entire Twitter timeline was people just being like,
Oh man,
I made $2 million today. And you're like, cool. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
It's like, what
I
am I
wish I knew
doing
how to
with
do that stuff.
my life? I mean, this is the thing. It's to the point where you felt crazy if you weren't doing NFTs, because
Right.
you have the illusion that like everyone is making money, and for the most part, like, a lot of people were in varying amounts, but when you see someone sells a image that you can make in 10 minutes for $300,000, it really makes you
I
question.
gotta do it. I gotta do it.
Yeah, those are really wild times, and I think like mentally hard times for a lot of.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I don't even like, for me personally. I mean, I took a stab at the NFT thing, and I made some sales or whatever, and even that was enough for me to feel good because I was like, oh, it's cool. Someone saw it and liked it, But even just like looking back, I'm like, what was just the mental space of that time too? It was really weird, man. Like everyone's like quarantining, we're like getting back in the vibe of like post COVID. People are struggling with work, and then it's like your timeline is just people being like, I sold this picture of a duck for $1 million, and you're like, shit, dude, what happened? Where did I go wrong?
I saw a duck today.
What did I miss, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, too, like it even affected me, and because there's this other thing about validation too. Like if you make a sale, then suddenly you feel validated as an artist. And I mean, again, there's so many things tied up with the NFT experience, which I generally think was unhealthy, especially like, oh, I just sold this for X amount of money, and then the FOMO aspect of it. And I think
Right.
social media has this habit of making it seem like everyone is in this experience when really it's just only a select few that's able to make those sales.
Yeah. So I have to plug one of our another guest that we had on the podcast, Ryan Selvey. He started doing this weekly show. So Ryan's done like a lot of stuff with Adobe Live. I think he's just like so well suited for doing these kind of like online series. And it was basically a a breakdown of all of like the content creator economy, and it was like these key stats done. I don't know what you know, you can watch it and see who actually did the study, but you know, this pretty in-depth study, and it was like the results were so astonishing. It was like very few make less, or like very few make over $100,000 a year. Like 60 to 70 some percent, it's like they're doing it in like their, you know, it's not their primary source of income. But it's like if you go on the internet, that is not, for me personally, I feel like that is not the vibe I get. You know, it's like you see a lot of people
Yeah.
that you're under the impression of like they are doing really well, and like, you know, it seems like it's so low effort or whatever. But anyways, just go Ryan Selvey, go check out his Instagram page. It's all linked there. But yeah, it's you know, he's doing interesting kind of looks at stuff like that, and it's, you know, it's, we all know the internet is not real life, but it's just interesting when you have these sort of like black swan moments like the NFT craze, and you know, suddenly all of that kind of goes out the window.
Yeah. I definitely feel that, like you were saying, it feels like everyone's making money, but it's just how social media is portrayed based on the algorithm. It's when people are screaming and making excitement, I want $1 million. Well, everyone likes it. Now everyone sees it. If you have a actual critical thinking delivery that's 3 minutes long on why NFTs are maybe not such a good investment, no one's going to watch it. Or a guy who's like, yeah, I didn't make that much. No one's going to watch it, you know, but one guy wins big and the whole world sees it. So it's
because everyone wants it. But
yeah. And so those polarizing things are always what the social media content is going to deliver to everybody. But I wanted to ask, going from NFTs, funny enough, I felt when the NFT phase was about to fade down, the thing that kept it going was this: you can take your NFTs and put it into the metaverse.
Oh,
wow. It's like, really? But minus the metaverse, there was the Quest 2. Then there was obviously the Quest 3. So I went from Quest 2 not using it that much, pretty much collected dust, to Quest 3 I actually kind of really like. And now there's the Apple Vision Pro, which I have a lot of thoughts on. But before I say any of my thoughts, have you tried the Apple Vision Pro or Quest 3? And what is your thoughts on that technology?
I've tried the Quest. I have not tried the Apple Vision Pro, though I am impressed by, you know, the technology. I think what they've done is like remarkable from like a hardware and software perspective. My question is like, what's the true utility? Like during COVID, I had my VR headset, and I think there were a couple of barriers to entry. I think specifically with VR, which is still like, well, one, you're wearing a headset. Two, depending on what you're doing, there's like the motion sickness part of it, which is a very real thing. And beyond that, like once the novelty of like, oh my gosh, I'm in this 3D world wears off, then you don't really care about it as much. And so I think this is why the AR pass-through stuff is a little bit more interesting, because it's more applicable to everyday life. But again, like the question is it more useful or convenient than using a phone or watching a TV? And this, I'm kind of seeing this with like a bunch of the different AI, like the humane pin and all these different things. The fundamental question, like, is it generally a better user experience? And the main reason our phones are successful is simply because it's convenient and it does a lot with little amount of effort. And so for Apple Vision Pro, like I'm kind of curious to see how that ecosystem is built. But you realize everyone was posting about it when it came out because it was great for content. But I had the sensibility, like, if people are still posting about this 4 months later on, then I think they've caught something. But I anticipate that like we're probably not going to see as much of it unless they could develop a very vibrant like software ecosystem where it really develops the utility.
Mikey, is that not the exact like Mikey's first take on it was like, there's nothing to do with it. I mean, it's like, it's a very cool piece of tech and it's so fun to put on and like interact with, but like there's no content. There's no.
It's trending right now on there. In the top 10, I kid you not, is Excel and Microsoft Word. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
It makes zero sense, you know. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
When I'm writing a Word document, it's write a Word document in VR. Like, that's
In VR. Yeah, there's I personally I recorded a whole series and I have been, there's things that even now I wish I would have said that I hadn't said, so maybe I'll say them now. But you know, I think like having a keyboard, I think typing's terrible on it, but
Well, have you tried it, Mikey?
I have it actually.
Oh,
believe it or
wow.
not.
Okay.
I still might return it next week, you know, so you can get it for 14 days. Highly recommend. You can go to the Apple store for free and they'll give you a half-hour demo. It's probably for most people the pinnacle peak top experience you'll get on the whole thing, because they give you the best little demos. They let you try all the best things. And then after that, it's kind of just a downhill slide of like, okay, I tried this. Not having any more fun on it.
Right.
But yeah, the typing, I think it should have came with a keyboard. Obviously, with the lack of the controllers, it's just, there's so many things that have come out with it. You know, they did the whole iPod and or not iPod, the iPad and iPhone apps can automatically go onto the Vision Pro, but the thing is that it's look gestures, so a lot of the icons are close and you accidentally misclick on the wrong thing, and it's so frustrating. So I think there just needs to be a complete refresh development, brand new apps. But I guess a long story short, I did find a pretty good use case the other day. I was video editing and playing poker with my friends. And I was streaming. So with Zoom up, I was able to have Zoom up. And granted, I look stupid, but they thought it was hilarious because I have my Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah.
But it was like the size of a full screen TV with everyone there. Wow. Then I had my board all the way here on my left. And the quality is good enough for video editing. I'm not even kidding. And it looks like you have a massive screen in front of you. And I've done that twice. And I enjoyed it, you know, compared to, I didn't have my screens in front of me, and compared to just having my laptop screen, because what happens is the poker and the Zoom take up the whole thing and I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
All I can do is play poker.
Yeah. And so having those extra screens was a little bit of a nice use case. I mean, I could talk for hours on it, but there's, you know, I definitely recommend booking an Apple demo and trying it out yourself. The pass through is astronomical. And I did say this in one of the clips, but I definitely think in 5 to 10 years, the technology that's being developed for the headset right now is what we'll be using in the future. It might be glasses, not an actual huge headset, but whatever people are figuring out and developing for it, that technology is going to transfer onto it. And there's no doubt in my mind that AR experiences will be everywhere and everyone will use it.
Do you actually think it's heavy?
No, I actually don't mind. And to be honest too, so the two big things that I think were amazing is the 3D videos are phenomenal. Like anytime Avatar, I see a 3D movie, I go see it. 3D IMAX every single time.
I didn't even think about that. Like you could get movies on the headset.
I'm always doing that. In the headset, it is better than a 3D IMAX theater. That in itself, if you like 3D IMAX movies and you're going to get a 4K TV that's probably a couple of grand, the headset is actually a pretty damn good option. Like it's cool. Like it works great and the quality is phenomenal. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out what can they do to make it better besides make it smaller. Like how is that going to incline me to make me want to use it? Because again, the thing about the phone, it's a thumb. This is what you're competing with at the end of the day, or like a monitor.
Well, and it's interesting because it's almost like we expect the tech to be better because tech has naturally always progressed to be, I mean, for the most part, has
Yeah.
seemed to, it's like the next version is always better. But I agree, it's almost like people just will always fall back to like the convenience of the phone. I mean, it's just, it's too easy.
Yeah, and again, like at the end of the day, people number one thing people want is convenience, easy use. And even if it was sunglasses, and I'm not like, I think for very niche things, industrial design, medicine, I think there's going to be like huge use cases. But I'm still curious to see, like, as a everyday tool, how effective it's going to be. And I don't know. I can't say one way or the other.
I think once it gets half the size, everyone will be using it. I strongly believe that. I'm gonna put my head out there. I feel like I'm pretty good at predicting future technologies.
Yeah.
The applications I've seen from having multiple screens, going to a coffee shop and having a screen this big, literally this big, versus 4 massive screens. You can have your football game on, the news on, and you can have Discord right here or over here. It's very, I mean, these are sit down scenarios like coffee shop. I can already see myself wearing it in this headset. I would wear in an airplane. I would not wear the Quest 3 in an airplane.
Right.
Right.
And I think, now we're talking about bus. Now, maybe the next step is on a subway, you're wearing something that's thin enough. I think it's also, the last thing I'll say is there's this social norm that we're not used to yet of seeing VR and AR headsets out in the wild. It's definitely, you become a spectacle. And I think once that's broken and it doesn't feel as awkward for most people, it'll start to catch fire. But as of right now, you catch me dead before you see me with
Yeah. Well, the question is,
walking
though,
around in
like,
public.
what happens when you want to show someone what you're looking at or enjoy the experience with someone else? I think,
That's also a big lack right now. Yeah.
yeah, I think that one just generally is going to be like, it's still a very isolating device. But again, like, there's ways to fix all that stuff. I've just no, well, VR for sure not been sold. AR I think has uh more potential for success. But I think we'll wait and see. I just know it
Well,
because I mean, I'm sure like the Apple Vision Pro is way better than like my Oculus One. But even so,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have to try it. But I'm just like, all right, cool.
Mhm.
I gotta put this thing on now, and then I gotta first like boom. And I think that's the thing long term, unless they make it easier to use. That might, I don't know, trip.
Yeah.
Well, along the lines of like future tech and everything, it doesn't all have to be sort of this predictive look at what's happening, how crazy is everything. Also, just for you personally, what is in the future? Like, what future projects are you tracking towards? Are there like specific goals or creative goals that you'd like to meet over the next few years that you're looking at?
I want to do another short. I think that's my. I think what MetaHuman has been doing with just performance capture and the ability to really create stories that has like more of the human touch to it is really interesting. I want to kind of dive into that realm a bit more. Obviously there's going to be stuff for work that I'll be like for the company I'll be doing that can't really discuss, but from a personal perspective, I think it's just to keep improving like my just the skills, like the quality of rendering and lighting is continuously getting better, and I need to make sure that the work I'm doing still feels up to par. But also, again, like what we were discussing earlier, how can I use that to find different ways to express things and
Storytelling.
correct, and making that interesting. But now you got a storytell in 5 seconds.
You don't have to, but you are strongly encouraged to. It feels like, yeah.
So just like again, doing all of that with the constraints of how we market things in 2024. But people do enjoy longer format content. It just depends on what platform it's being showcased on.
Delivered,
And I
yeah.
think That's why things were easier back in I don't know, the 2000s, as everyone was watching. Oh my god, like advertising was so much easier. It's
Yeah,
like,
right. You had three things to pick from, basically.
if you put it out and you pay this, people are going to watch it.
Right.
Now you have to make the thing and devise a strategy for people to watch the thing that you've made, because now they have the choice to just opt out. And quite frankly, no matter how like great a commercial is, you just know when you're swiping, when you're on a like intuitively, like you just know. So it's very difficult to have someone to create something that's going to interest someone for 3 or 5 seconds. Uh, and it sucks because like social media is the great equalizer. A cute cat video could be as impactful as the most refined 3D thing now, and that's what you're up against. But what's different is like depending on the medium, like when you're on TV, suddenly people expect quality and refinement, and that changes the game. But yeah, I think with social media, it's just Anyways, that was a tangent. I digress.
No, no, I mean, no, I think that's like such an it's an important thing to remember right now that like the industry that I got into 10 years ago doesn't exist. The industry that existed 5 years ago doesn't exist. I mean, honestly, even last year, 2 years ago, like it's so, and of course, like I'm sure there's some psychological bias at play here, but I've always kind of maintained that it feels somewhat unique to our industry. I mean, it's such a new medium. It's been a new medium. It's still getting its legs. There's so many things that like we're falling behind the curve of like addressing the earliest issues of this industry. And now that's being compounded by explosions in tech and generative AI. And, it is a wild time to be doing this. That is for sure.
Oh, for sure. Like it's been kind of nonstop for motion designers and digital artists. You have NFTs, and as soon as that, now I think mentally that was tough for a lot of folks. In addition to like the economic environment, and then you have a whole new disruptive technology coming to potentially take jobs. And I think for creative folks, that's it's really spooky. That's why I saw those protests from the film industry, from the writers and the actors, and they made sure that they got assurances that you can't do certain things.
A key aspect of it was, generative AI. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why VFX artists can't follow. I mean, everyone, the Actors Guild, Writers Guild, and
Right.
how can like what can I get done in Hollywood without the um,
Oh my gosh.
VFX artists?
But yeah, pick any streaming service and then imagine what any of their hit titles would be like without any VFX. And
Correct. And I
pretty
don't
sobering.
know like the nuances, and I mean, I'm sure it has to have some good reason, but with the but I do think that industry can benefit from coming together and being like, well,
We're
to
not trying to do
get
this.
this work done, we need to standardize some things. The difficulty is they changed the business model now, so like I'm sure like studios aren't getting as much return on movies and on shows, which then filters into the budgets that they have to produce them.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know the full business of like film and television, but I think there's a reason why so many of these streaming services are not being profitable. You go from very lucrative license deals to, I don't know, just charging a monthly subscription to 50 different streaming services. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the long term play, especially for consumers. It's not. I mean, you go from paying for cable and you get like a bunch of channels, and now it's even more expensive to like have to pay for all these.
$150 for 15 different streaming services or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, dude, I feel like we covered everything. I'm sure we'll get off and I'll be like, shit, I should have asked that.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's been a great chat. Like I had a lot of fun just kicking it with you all and just talking about the industry, and it's
Yeah,
it's just a crazy time right now, man.
it is. It really is. You're in New York, right?
I am in New York. Yes.
So we have I mean, we do a monthly meetup. That we have a really solid turnout, honestly, and it's really cool because it's just like it's everyone. It's like it's kids that are still at SVA, and then it's like people that are we've got people that are like, I decided like 2 years ago to quit my job of 20 years to get into motion design, which I'm like, I don't know if I would have done that, but
Yeah.
come on, get in here.
Yeah.
So if you're ever around, you want to come out. We've been doing like speaker series too. So if you ever have the itch
Yeah.
to do some speaking or whatever, you know, it's we had Shane Few who did this really cool thing on some of his AI stuff that went viral. We have Danny Behar this week, who's from SNL, just doing like a breakdown of some of the like SNL spots he worked on. It's really cool, man. It's a good vibe. So if you're ever around, it's in Brooklyn, the last Thursday of every month. We'll, you know, if you're ever interested, hit us up. We'll give you all the deets.
Nice. Are you both in New York?
Yeah.
What? Oh, that's crazy. Okay, yeah. Okay, just send me
We're holding it down. I'll shoot
Yeah.
you. We'll shoot you the details for sure. And if it's not this one, you know, again, it's like a monthly thing. And just XR Motion in general, we've been tracking to maybe do a conference next year. So we'll see.